Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Government House. My name is Hugh Borroman. I have the honour to be the official secretary to Her Excellency the Governor, and I'll be the Master of Ceremonies today. Now, if you are able, please be upstanding for the arrival of the official party. The official party comprises the Honourable Vicky Chapman, representing the Premier of South Australia, Mr Chris Picton MP, representing the Leader of the Opposition, Lieutenant Commander Benjamin Robertson, representing the Commanding Officer, Navy Headquarters South Australia, Lieutenant Colonel Ilona Horan, representing the Army Area Representative South Australia, Group Captain Alison McCarthy, representing the Senior Australian Defence Force Officer Edinburgh, and Acting Assistant Commissioner John Bendito, representing the Commissioner of Police. And I give you Her Excellency the Governor of South Australia, the Honourable Francis Adamson AC, and Mr Rod Bunton.
I acknowledge that we're meeting today on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people and pay my respects to the elders. Welcome everyone, it's lovely to see you all here this morning. It's a really special day and Rod and I are just so happy to be welcoming you to Government House. I know a number of you will be here for the first time, that always happens. And I know there'll be some of you who've been before, perhaps a very long time ago, and others will have been regular visitors over the years. I want to particularly welcome and acknowledge this morning, though, the Deputy Premier, representing the Premier of South Australia, and the Minister for Health, the Shadow Minister for Health and Wellbeing, representing the Leader of the Opposition. It's wonderful also to have the service chiefs and their representatives behind me, and I think that demonstrates to everyone here that this is a very special occasion, not only in your own lives, but in the life of our state. To the recipients of awards we're honouring today, I just want to say to you, I hope you'll feel as comfortable when you step forward to receive your award as you have every single day that you've given the service that we're recognising today. And of course, the Order of Australia, Australia's national honours system, is to recognise Australians who've given outstanding service or whose achievements have been absolutely exceptional. To those of you who are here in support, as family members, the people the award recipients love most or on whom they've relied so heavily, you know the story of the person you're supporting. You often know that intimately. In many cases, they couldn't have done what they've done without you. But over the course of the ceremony, you will come to hear the stories of others. And I think by the end of it, you will agree that it all adds up to something quite extraordinary. Extraordinary too, that in the main, in fact I can't think of an exception to this, award recipients are very modest about their achievements. In many cases they're completely surprised when the award is announced, and as I've mentioned during the course of the week, because I've become aware of it, a number of recipients, when they receive the email informing them of the news and asking for permission to be granted the award, they don't think it's real, they delete the email. We're laughing, but actually there have been several instances of it during the week. People have checked with their husbands, wives, partners. They don't think it's real either, it's been deleted. So I do want to say to you, please though, encourage others to nominate Australians worthy of recognition. The reason you're all here today is because someone chose to nominate you or to nominate someone you care deeply about. And really the whole thing relies on that. So you know, I encourage you please to nominate, but I also encourage you to nominate others. There are so many worthy Australians here in South Australia who I hope very much to be recognising at ceremonies like this during my term as Governor. Official Secretary.
Your Excellency, the following appointment to Officer of the Order of Australia in the General Division has been made. Professor Donald William Howie is recognised for distinguished service to medicine in the field of orthopaedics and to professional medical organisations. Professor Howie is Clinical Director of the Royal Adelaide Hospital Orthopaedic and Trauma Service, Head of the University of Adelaide Discipline of Orthopaedics and Trauma, and Co-Clinical Director of the Centre for Orthopaedic and Trauma Research at the University of Adelaide. As a senior orthopaedic surgeon, he specialises in joint replacement, focusing on complex revisions and hip reconstruction in young patients. Professor Howie has an international reputation as both a practising surgeon and scientist, with regular invitations as a guest lecturer at international meetings. He's been a previous chairman, hip section, of the Asia Pacific Orthopaedic Association, and is an invited member of the 60-member International Hip Society, the first of only 2 Australians. Professor Howie is also a recently invited member of the American Hip Society. He is a reviewer for highly ranked journals in his discipline and has been on the editorial board of several others. He has been published over 100 times on topics including periprosthetic bone loss, implant wear, and clinical management. Professor Donald William Howie. Your Excellency, the following appointments to Member of the Order of Australia in the General Division have been made. Mrs. Joanna and Mr. Richard Collins are recognised for significant service to the community through charitable initiatives. Mr. and Mrs. Collins have both combined successful business careers with big-hearted philanthropy, supporting a myriad of animal welfare, conservation and children's charities in Australia and overseas. Known for being active participants as well as generous donors, as a couple and individually, they contribute to a range of organisations, including Oz Harvest, Animals Asia Foundation, the Jane Goodall Institute, the Green Gecko Foundation, Cambodia World Vision, the Andrea Bocelli Foundation, and the Adelaide Botanical Gardens Foundation, to name but a few. They were also donors to the statue of Her Majesty the Queen, recently installed in the grounds of Government House. Moved by the plight of orangutans in Borneo, they are both ambassadors for the Orangutan Foundation International Australia. And after visiting the Orangutan Care Centre, they donated funds to buy a much-needed digital X-ray machine and generator. Mr. and Mrs. Collins are also recognised for their contribution to the Duke of Edinburgh International Award Programme as Gold Fellows and Award Ambassadors, with Mrs. Collins also being a Pearl Champion. Their philosophy on life is simple: you come into the world with nothing and go out with nothing, so all that matters is what you do in between. Mrs. Joanna and Mr. Richard Collins. Ms. Wendy Johnson is recognised for significant service to secondary education in South Australia. When Ms. Johnson started as principal of Langrea International High School in 2008, more than 50% of student results in the South Australian Certificate of Education were below state average. Ms. Johnson set to work, working closely with school leaders and teachers to evolve their teaching practices based on leading evidence-based approaches. She also gave students a voice on how they learn and the school's strategic directions. Since then, the school has experienced a 20% lift in its students' A grades and a 20% decrease in failing grades. The number of students choosing to take the International Baccalaureate has also doubled, giving Glenunga one of the largest IB diploma programs in Australia. Ms. Johnson has also been an active contributor to the broader South Australian educational community. In 2018, she was seconded by the Minister for Education to undertake a review of the SACE. She has also served for several years as Vice President of the South Australian Secondary Principals Association. Ms. Wendy Johnson. The Reverend John Warren Madden is recognised for significant service to the Uniting Church in Australia and to the community. Reverend Madden grew up in Blackwood before training for the Methodist ministry in the early 1960s. Following his ordination, he undertook appointments in a range of city and country congregations and also spent time as a university chaplain. Running parallel to these appointments, he also dedicated 25 years to working as a chaplain in the Army Reserve. Between 1989 and 91, the Reverend Madden was installed as moderator of the Uniting Church in South Australia. During this time, he acted as the spiritual head and primary spokesman for the Uniting Church in our state, a role with great authority and responsibility. In 2003, he chose to gain some international experience, taking up an appointment with the Methodist Church in Britain in the Gosport Fareham circuit. He retired in 2006, but returned briefly to chaplaincy in 2008 to serve the congregation at Brougham Place Uniting Church. In his retirement, Reverend Madden has been a dedicated volunteer with the West Torrens branch of Meals on Wheels. The Reverend Dr. John Warren Madden. Your Excellency, the Medal of the Order of Australia in the General Division has been awarded to the following recipients. Mr. Petras Bielskis is recognised for service to the Lithuanian community of South Australia. Having left Europe in 1950, Mr. Bielskis knows the value of keeping community, heritage and culture alive while contributing to a new country. Settling in Adelaide, he became an Adelaide Lithuanian community member and started fundraising so the community could purchase its own building. From a small dilapidated church in Norwood, the building was renovated, grew and became the hub of Lithuanian life in Adelaide. Mr. Bielskis served the Adelaide Lithuanian Society initially as treasurer and then for an extraordinary 24 years as president. For 19 years, he was also editor of the local Lithuanian newsletter. His deep commitment to community and international relations has been recognised with 2 high-level Lithuanian awards. He was also one of Australia's representatives at 3 World Lithuanian Parliaments. Now in his 90s, Mr. Bielskis' connection with the Adelaide Lithuanian community remains strong. Mr. Petras Bielskis. The late Ms. Judith Lorraine Crabtree is recognised for service to primary education. Her son Midwin will accept the medal on behalf of the family. The late Ms. Crabtree was an influential and much-loved teacher, widely regarded as ahead of her time in understanding the power of arts as a process for learning. She was the driving force in establishing visual arts education in primary schools and developed a curriculum document, One Approach. As a primary art teacher, she assisted teachers to understand how art can create confidence in children by using their inquisitiveness to develop numeracy and literacy skills. Later, while working as an art teacher in the APY lands, she witnessed the high levels of visual literacy and creative spirit in Anangu children and adapted her teaching style to harness their natural curiosity and enthusiasm. Working within Indigenous parenting practices, Ms. Crabtree recognised the need to include young children, babies and their families in the learning process. The late Ms. Judith Lorraine Crabtree. Mrs. Jennifer Margaret Curnow is recognised for service to the community through a range of roles. Mrs. Curnow began a long connection with community and volunteer work through the activities of her family's 3 small children. Her dressmaking and knitting prowess has been front and centre for several community and calisthenics clubs for whom she has produced costumes, uniforms and knitted miniatures. When Mrs. Curnow's daughter started to learn Scottish Highland dancing, she developed a long-term commitment to and passion for making kilts. Originally self-taught, she studied at the Keith Kilt School in Scotland to gain skills which are passed down through time from the earliest kilt makers. And after this experience, she founded the Adelaide Kilt Makers Guild. Known for being focused, reliable and extremely hard-working, Mrs. Curnow pitches in wherever she is needed, including at the Tea Tree Gully Heritage Museum, the Morialta Uniting Church, North Eastern Hospital Canteen, the Dernan Court and Highbury Mothers and Babies Committee, and the South Australian Miniature Enthusiasts. Mrs. Jennifer Margaret Curnow. Mr. Reginald Dodd is recognised for service to the Indigenous community of Maree. Mr. Dodd is a proud Arabana elder and has, at various stages of this life, been a stockman, train inspector, heritage officer, historian, photographer, singer and tour guide, as well as a lifelong advocate for the Arabana people. He has made an extraordinary impact on the Maree community through a long history of volunteering for organisations that seek equal access for Aboriginal people to quality services. Mr. Dodd is founder of Lawyers for the Arabana Maree People, which has provided millions of dollars of pro bono legal assistance, including legal support for native title, which was granted to the Arabana in 2012. He has been chair of the Arabana People's Committee since 1996 and was the president of the Maree and District Progress Association. For the past 25 years, Mr. Dodd has devoted his time to helping bridge the gap by running cross-cultural tours of the Lake Eyre region. Mr. Reginald Dodd. Mr. Kevin Ferguson is recognised for service to triathlon. Mr. Ferguson is an Adelaide triathlon legend, having competed in a staggering number of completed Ironman competitions and winning multiple trophies. What makes his achievements all the more impressive is that he was a relative latecomer to the sport, spurred on by the quest for a fitter lifestyle. Mr. Ferguson has drawn on his Ironman skills to raise funds for the Cancer Council in honour of his late mother's battle with that disease. He has also raised money to assist a mate living with quadriplegia to fulfil his dreams to finish an Ironman race. As part of this effort, Mr. Ferguson towed, pushed and carried his friend Sid James for the 3.8 kilometre swim, 180 kilometre bike ride and 42.2 kilometre run in the Busselton Ironman. Mr. Ferguson is a life member of the West Lakes Triathlon Club and was made a legend of the sport from Triathlon Australia in 2015. He was inducted into the Triathlon South Australia Hall of Fame in 2009. Mr. Kevin Ferguson. Mrs. Barbara Joyce Johnson is recognised for service to the community of Naracoorte. Mrs. Johnson has dedicated more than 50 years to serving her community. Most impressively, this includes 54 years as a member and office holder of the Naracoorte branch of the Australian Red Cross. Between 1996 and 2003, Mrs. Johnson was either President or Secretary of the South East Zone of Australian Red Cross and for 10 years was a Red Cross driver. She was also chairperson of the board of the Longridge Aged Care Facility for 9 years. Other community commitments include service to the Parents and Friends Committee of Naracoorte Primary School, Naracoorte Football Club Ladies Auxiliary, the Naracoorte branch of the Multiple Sclerosis Society, and Meals on Wheels. In recognition of her voluntary work and love of the community, in 1989, Mrs. Johnson received the Australia Day Citizen of the Year Award from the Naracoorte District Council. Mrs. Barbara Joyce Johnson. Mr. Oscar Edwin Jopic is recognised for service to the Lutheran Church and to the community. A teacher by profession, Mr. Jopic has dedicated much of his life to the service of others. His volunteer work has included several stints in Papua New Guinea, the first from 1958 to 59 and the most recent in 1996. After his retirement in 1991, Mr. Jopic continued to volunteer with his local community in the Barossa, including with the disability services organisation Barossa Enterprises. As a driver with the Barossa Council Community Transport Scheme for 14 years, he made 221 trips to Adelaide and drove 35,721 kilometres. Mr. Jopic moved into the Tanunda Lutheran Home with his wife Irene in 2005 and became chair of the Residence Committee that same year. He held that position for 9 years and was assistant chair until last year. Mr. Jopic still volunteers with Tanunda Lutheran Home Church and St Paul's Lutheran Church. Mr. Oscar Edwin Jopik. Dr. John Scott Langrea is recognised for service to tertiary education. Dr. Langrea's interest in developing and evaluating creative and critical thinking spans more than 30 years. He is a world-renowned author and researcher and has written more than 25 books and 100 articles, focusing on topics such as creative and critical thinking, learning styles and personality types, brain functioning and thinking skills. His books have been translated into several languages and published as far afield as Saudi Arabia, Mexico and India, among other countries. Dr. Langrea has taught in US and Australian universities, including 25 years as senior lecturer at the South Australian College of Advanced Education and later the University of South Australia. He has spoken at a number of international conferences and has held countless workshops and seminars for adults and children. In 2005, he developed the John Langrea Thinking Program, which focuses on developing the mindset and critical thinking skills of children from 4 to 8. Dr. John Scott Langrea. Your Excellency, the Commendation for Brave Conduct has been awarded to Mr. Stephen Forey, who is recognised for the rescue of a person from a burning cabin at Port Fairy in Victoria in December 2017. Mr. Forey was holidaying with his family at a caravan park in Port Fairy when he became aware of a fire in a nearby cabin. He quickly ran to the cabin and was informed that there was someone inside. Together with another man, he attempted to gain entry to the cabin. While 2 men entered the building, he alerted people in nearby cabins to evacuate as the flames were spreading. Mr. Forey went back to the side of the burning cabin and saw that a teenage girl had appeared at a window. He tried to remove the small window frame and then, along with others, coaxed, then pulled her out of the cabin. The guttering above the men's heads was now on fire. Mr. Forey and the others dragged the teenager from the cabin, which was then consumed by flames. For his actions, Mr. Forey is commended for brave conduct. Mr. Stefan Forey. Your Excellency, that concludes the presentations for this morning.
Thank you. Well, look, I'm sure you'd all agree. I mean, what a wonderful group of Australians, South Australians, honoured today, people very dear to you. So let's give them all another round of applause to show our appreciation for those recipients of honours in the Order of Australia today.